done, now Fred's work is done. Yeast is doing the work to make the beer from the wort.
So, just like Mark said, now our hands are off of it. We've kind of, sent our baby down the road. It's out of our control, and it's up to a single cellular molecule to finish the job. Now, this is kind of, like I said, my favorite part about brewing. It's because it's the last thing figured out. The German Reinheitsgebot, the purity law, was water, malt, and hops. They had no idea yeast was even a thing. They called it God is good. They took a little old beer, threw it in a new beer, voila, you had beer. They had no idea until Louis Pasteur put it under a microscope and basically found out that, hey, there's this little, what's the name of beer brewer's yeast? Cerveza, the Saccharomyces cerveza.
Oh, yeah.
There's this one little guy that's doing all this work for us. So when it's pitched in, it goes to work. But yeast has a dramatic, if the biggest effect on flavor out of anything else we really did. You could take one brew and pitch 5 different yeast strains into it and get 5 completely different beers out of it. You have your traditional German lager yeast, which are literally little scrubbers, little sponges. They pull all the bad flavors out. Lager fermentation is kind of off-putting. It's very sulfuric. It's got a funky smell to it. That's because it's pulling all that out of the beer and expressing it through the CO2. So yeast eats sugar, creates CO2 and alcohol. Then you get into the old English ale strains, which are greener, bitey. They're not as refined. They act fast. They have, they leave a lot of, I don't want to say rough flavors behind, but they leave a lot of flavor behind. Belgian wit strains, we call it Band-Aid and Bubblegum. Think of Hugard and Blue Moon. They've got these, it's kind of like a rich, estery smell, but then, a sweet, smooth taste going down. Bavarian Hefeweizens, clove and bananas. And it's all from the yeast, completely different kinds. Not to mention a lot of the wild Belgian styles, other stuff. There are theoretically limitless amounts of yeast. And that's what it does. So it takes about 8 hours to brew the beer. It takes 7 days to ferment the beer out. So what we do is we have a high sugar content in the beer. So its specific gravity is between 12 Plato up to 22 Plato. So that's the density of sugar in the liquid. The yeast starts eating that and creates alcohol, which is lighter than water. So you watch the gravity drop fast. It takes about 7 days for the yeast to be done. And when you reach that desired ratio of alcohol, residual sugar, and water, we shut it down. And by shutting it down, it's not very hard. We close the system and turn the temperature down. And the yeast falls asleep and it fluctuates out and collects in the bottom. So up until 50, 60 years ago, we are lucky enough to have what are called unitanks. 100 years ago, you would have had 2 fermenters. Well, you would have had a fermenter and then an aging tank. Every time you move beer around, you are losing beer, and you're creating an opportunity to pick up a contaminant, but then you have to clean it. These tanks don't care if there's 20 barrels or 180 barrels. You have to clean them. So one of the biggest efficiencies in brewing is planning. A little bit of planning, filling your tank up to the top, using it all, because one thing, if you look around, there's lots of toxic chemicals. We have lots of acids. The toxic breaks down the organics, and the acid sterilize it. So if we have, that's hot we have. If we have, again, here's a great example of human error. We're busy working. I know, it's nice and hot. You're all right, Matt, don't worry. So you don't know it's full until it starts coming out. Maybe the float valve's not working. So that's why we like automation and computers. These guys don't have to have a panic attack, and you're not wasting hot water. It's just one of the things, so it's the constants of brewing of always. That's a great example of the pitfalls. And, that happens in every brewery. That ever happens is that's 180 degree water flowing onto the ground. It's Yeah, it could run for 2 hours or they could catch it in a minute.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So with the cleaning regimen, everything you have to go through, it's a couple-hour process. Slows you down. So we like to fill these tanks up and use them. So during the aging process, it's cold, the yeast falls to the bottom, and we just bleed the yeast off, bleed the yeast off. We never have to transfer it. We don't have to clean a second tank. We're ready to go in here until we go to filtration. It's cold, takes about 2 weeks of aging to clean up and reach temperature. And what you're trying to do, yeast has a lot of flavor, so we want to get that out. You know, we want just, a little bit of yeast is okay. Too much is, it gets stale. So if you get like, you ever drink an old Hefeweizen and it starts to taste like kind of, there's like a cardboard flavor to it. Wet cardboard, we call it. You know, we have a lot of good terms here, but yeast has, you know, at a certain level, it's overkill. At an under, but it also has shelf stability properties. It locks in a lot, it grabs a lot of that oxygen, holds on to it. So if there's too much yeast, that's what you start tasting. A little bit of yeast holds you in perfect situation. Did I miss anything? What do we?
I think that's everything. Let's just recap.
The bucket.
Yeah, let's look at the
That's the
bucket.
carbon dioxide coming out of it.
So just as a recap, to make beer, you're combining sugar water, yeast, and hops.
Yep.
The yeast eats the sugar, and the byproduct is the alcohol. And that fermentation process in these tanks takes about a week.
Yep.
And the yeast are then cooled down so they stop eating the sugar. And when they get too cold and go to sleep, they start to sink to the bottom of the tank. And then it takes, did you say 2 weeks
It
about?
takes about 2 weeks, 1 month for a lager, 2 weeks for an ale. It takes 7 days to ferment, but then the aging process is what really changes it. Lager is literally a German verb, to store. So it's a slower acting yeast, takes a little bit longer to fall out of solution. But we also have new pieces of equipment that kind of speed that up a little bit, because back in the day you just had to wait, you know, so they would pull off on a higher port and just keep letting it sit. Fill it back up and let it sit. Fill it back up and let it sit.
So and then the other product that the yeast produce from eating the sugar is carbon dioxide. And you don't want the carbon dioxide to stay in the tank. So they have a hose that allows the carbon dioxide to leave the tank, and they bubble it through this bucket of water. And why do you put it through the bucket of water?
It creates a vapor lock, so contaminants can't get up into it. At some point in time when it slows down, it can become a negative pressure.
So air out here can flow into
Yeah.
the hose and into the tank, and they don't want that.
If you didn't bleed that off, this tank would explode. There's so much pressure there.
So one of the things, this is one of our, there's 2 things we missed, is our, basically our byproduct. There's one, it's our spent grain that comes out. So we'll use about 1.5 million pounds of grain. That creates a little over 2 million pounds of spent grain. That's our #1 waste product. We don't want to throw that away. So we actually give it away to farmers. So we have a trailer out back. It gets pumped in, it's covered. He takes it away every couple of days. Every 6 brews, I think his trailer could hold. Drops one off, takes one away. And that saves on, we're a tiny brewery, we really are. Saves about 2 million pounds of waste a year.
So instead of that waste going to a landfill, it's going to a farm where cows
Feeding
eat it.
cattle. So we've taken the sugar out. It's plant matter and protein. They mix it in with some of their corn and barley. It's hydrating, it's nutritious, they love it. So it's a win-win. So another thing here is the CO2 output. When you reach a certain size, we could capture that, filter it, and use it in the finished product. But that's the definition of a return on investment right there, because that system is a few $100,000, and it's around 50 to 60,000 barrels of beer a year. That gives you like a 3-year payback. So anything below that, we like businesses run on 2 to 3 year payback. Some guys are 12 months depending on it. You know, 3 years after that, you kind of start looking for other projects to do. So once it gets below that 2-3 year payback, return on investment, then we'll start capturing that, and it just saves another byproduct. We don't make enough CO2 here to be an issue. You know, we're well ventilated. It looks like a lot because it's bubbling. It's not that much.
So it's not a health issue.
It's not a health issue. It's just, but it can be just a good dollars and cents because all the CO2 comes from a lot of other industries.
Right.
But they truck it in.
Right.
So it comes in. Actually, ours comes out of New York. It's one of the nearest plants. But still, they're driving 300 miles.
Because you use carbon dioxide in other parts of your business operation.
Yes. Oh, everything is purged. Oxygen is kryptonite to beer, so everything gets purged. We use a lot of CO2 here.
So if you get to the point where you grow enough that you can capture your own CO2, you could then reuse it.
We could supplement, so it still wouldn't meet half of our demand, but it still just supplements it and it's free. You know, you just
So how close are you? You said you need to get to 50,000?
We need a couple more tanks. I think we could ferment about 38,000 barrels here, and we're already on the hunt for new tanks. We're looking at some 200 barrel guys. These are 150s, 100s, and 380s. So there's some used 200 barrel tanks that are very nice looking. So
Who's selling them?
Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
So
You put them here?
we don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet.
Oh,
We
okay.
saw them. We're like, oh, look at that. About 40 cents on the dollar, which doesn't happen. And then you got to rig them, get them here. That's a whole double your price, so they're not 40 cents on the dollar.
Is this coming from a Hefe or a German wheat here, or can you smell the esters?
I do. I actually
The banana esters, can you smell that?
Little bit.
When it first started flowing, it was like...
I don't know what kind of beer that is, but that's exactly what I thought. I was getting that nice sweet smell. I like it.
Banana esters from the yeast.
So that's something the students really can't appreciate, that when you start eating the sugar, you keep talking about the flavors, but we can smell them here in the brewery.
Well, that's one of the big things. Aroma is taste. You can't smell it, you can't taste it. So that's what the hops and the yeast give a lot of that aroma, which is just the underlying basis for how things are going to taste. So once we do all this, now we have to clean it. So one of the most important parts of the brewery is this piece. This is a CIP system, clean in place. And basically what this does is one's a caustic reservoir, one's an acid reservoir. So like I said, once you use these tanks, they have to be clean. Be it 20 barrels or 200 barrels. It takes the same amount of time. Basically, heat and concentration of chemicals that get your cleaning done. So, you know, when we were just getting started, a guy would open the door and dump the chemicals in and turn the pump on. You don't know if it's clean. So and it's dangerous. So, you know, those chemicals are pretty nasty. So what we do now is everything goes through a recirculation with this. There's conductivity meters on it. There's timers, has its own pumps. So if it takes an hour to clean the tank, it's clean in an hour. A guy sets the pump up, walks away, might run for 2 hours, you know, like, oh my gosh, I left that running. So that gets it cleaner, faster, with the proper amount of chemicals. So too little chemicals, you're not clean. You're gonna ruin beer. Too many chemicals, you're just being wasteful. So it does the job through, you know, the computer controlling it. Takes a very unfun, dangerous part of the job out of somebody's hands and does it better. So in case, you know, you guys can't feel it because it's really hot in here. The other one business decision we made was our boiler. Now it's not that cool. It's kind of about as cool as a clean in place technology, but it literally is the heart of the brewery. No heat, no brewing, no packaging. We need steam, and this is how we make it. So you can see it's nice and loud in here. This is our steam boiler, high pressurized steam. It's absolutely necessary. Without this, we're not working. So one of the things that we see, I'll shut the door so I can talk about it. That was one of the things we invested in. That is a Muir LX 200 high pressure steam boiler. Yeah, it's not that cool, but it makes more steam per cubic foot of natural gas than any boiler on the market. That was a straight business decision. It was $50,000 more. It was approximately I'd say about 20% more than the next model. But you could sit down on paper. That boiler has a 20-year lifespan. So what we've been able to do is in 5 years, it paid for itself. So we got 15 years of cheaper energy, less energy consumed. And that is just, it's really a perfect example of environmental consciousness meeting smart business practices. Because it's, like I said, a lot of people might skimp on their boiler, but that is on demand. So we work faster, we work better, and we work cheaper with less gas. And it powers everything. So that's our our hot water tank. There, watch where it's wet.